Hi, my name is Shannon. If you ask anybody who knows me, I'm a movie person. I'm a big film nerd. I don't like the term cinephile because while it has a fascinating, rich history, it still feels kind of elitist and exclusionary. Some of the biggest and most knowledgeable film enthusiasts I know hoard VHS tapes of weirdo cult films and schlock and don't fit in well with the KA crowd. That's what I want to talk about today though, elitism and exclusion, and video games. I'm not someone who identifies as a gamer either. Like cinephile, the label feels wrong for me. I'm broke and busy and don't work to keep up with most AAA releases. I also don't want to define myself by what I consume. I think there's something inherently problematic in building your identity around brands and media. To be honest though, I already kind of do that with movies, but I have a lot of ambivalence about it, so whatever.
Made it!
Regardless, I love video games. When I was little, I'd watch my cousins play Zelda, and I'd play Flash games for hours. When I got the PlayStation I'd begged for, I played a ton of JRPGs and platformers and whatever looked interesting at Blockbuster. I wasn't a very excitable or emotional kid, but when my parents surprised me with a PS2, I absolutely flipped out with pure joy. Then, over the years, more consoles, getting into PC gaming, and along the way, there were more of the weird, little experimental games I've been into since elementary school. So, while video games aren't a part of my identity or a part of my career in the way that film is, there's still something that absolutely fascinates me, regardless of my outsider status. I also love horror. I loved short horror story compilations as a little kid and checked as many as I could out of the library. I watched Are You Afraid of the Dark and Vincent Price films and Universal horror films, and I distinctly remember being proud of being 6 years old and making it through a spooky Y7 rated TV show. I've written horror stories and scripts and consume horror media with little fear or squeamishness, with the hardened constitution of a veteran of the genre. All that being said, no piece of media has ever scared me the way that Silent Hill 2 has.
One of the eeriest things about it is that it doesn't seem that bothered. It's like, hey, walk along that road, it's a bit eerie, the slime monster over there, kind of your problem.
The creatures in Silent Hill 2 are not your run-of-the-mill horror game monsters. They have no horns, no tentacles, no supernatural powers. They're monstrous because their shapes suggest deformed human features.
And not only is it expertly unsettling and weird and haunting,
certain sequences that might seem overlong were inserted deliberately to convey a feeling of isolation.
But its portrayal of loss and grief and naked desperation resonated with me in ways I can't even properly articulate. I've lost a lot of people close to me, and that grief is something I have to live with every day. So to be able to explore this world of fog and death and shambling monsters that represent psychological hang-ups and repressed pain was tremendous for me.
I guess the reason why Silent Hill 2 really speaks to me is because I've been struggling with anxiety disorder my whole life. And I know what it's like when it feels like your own mind is against you. Like you're in a situation and your rational mind is saying there's nothing to worry about, but there's still things that just make you physically sick with nerves, and the fact that you got no way to explain it just makes it worse.
I love the feeling of a piece of art reflecting a part of myself back at me, and I love it even more if it's a part that not a lot of works explore, or a part that I have trouble exploring on my own.
This feeling of psychological terror, specific to Silent Hill 2, was the product of serious brainstorming about the human mind and heart.
Because what Silent Hill 2 was about is that the greatest horror is what's inside you.
The problem that games have is that it's a medium that exists kind of outside the mainstream. For want of a better phrase, old media don't really understand the games industry and how games work.
No, that's not true. I mean, I am on Twitter and I think I'm at the cutting edge.
The video games as art debate is a big weird sore spot for a lot of people. I think there's a perception that gamers are desperate for validation and respect for their hobby from the old guard, and people view that as pathetic or unnecessary, especially when there's resistance from within the community toward the harsh, in-depth critique that comes with the label. It's true that nobody should base what they love on what others deem worthy of the art crown.
What is your obsession with the violence in these games? These are pieces of Lego.
You like what you like, and if you like something sincerely, then you should never let someone take that away from you. And again, I'm not trying to defend something in order to rationalize my identity. If I let critics control how I felt about myself, I'd be a totally different person. But I can't pretend it's not frustrating to see people who will go to bat for films that they love totally dismiss games as a medium. Now, nobody can take away the hours I spent with James looking for his dead wife.
A dead person can't write a letter.
Not that it feels great to have that sincere of an experience dismissed, but it being dismissed doesn't devalue it at all. What is concerning, though, is the fact that people are depriving themselves of similar experiences without even knowing it. My first experience of interacting with any kind of computer was probably the first time I encountered a Space Invaders cabinet. It was the first time it occurred to me that I could manipulate images on a screen, and that's kind of affected my entire life. So
do you think I've had a sad and bereft life by not having dabbled in this stuff?
I would never be that judgmental. No, I don't think you have, but I think you are missing out.
I get excited just talking about experiences I've had in games, even in just describing scenarios. There's a unique thrill in being an active participant in these stories. I'm not telling a secondhand account the way I would if I were describing a film. Like, first he's running through the apartment complex, and then he's outside, and then the rain and the gun is great. It's a great set of images and a description of my favorite chase scene ever. And I can talk about my heart racing or feeling nervous or anxious, but it's not the same as. So I walk into this clearing, and there's this guy with his leg stuck in a bear trap, and he's freaking out, and zombies are coming, and I have an axe. That's all I have. And I hit the chain, and I can't break it, and the zombies are getting closer. And I have to make a decision. Because even though in that moment Lee Everett is the one on screen with the axe, I'm not just a spectator. I am a participant. Not only am I responsible for the progression of the story in a linear, unlocking content kind of way, but the story reacts to my input.
There's a very interesting game called Papers, Please, where you play as a corrupt, fictional Eastern European official. But the interesting thing about the game is you don't start out as a corrupt Eastern European border official.
You watch him being corrupted.
No, you become corrupted because you are the official.
Oh, you are.
And your job is to stamp people's papers. And
can you buck it? Can you pretend, can you say to yourself, I'm not going to be corrupted?
Yes, you can try, but the game makes it very difficult because you've got a family to feed.
So that's quite a challenge.
And so you end up having to cut corners, and in doing that, it's a satirical game that puts you in the feet of somebody who's slowly becoming corrupt. That's an experience that a game can communicate that many other mediums can't.
This element of responsibility and control can lead to a different kind of involvement, including in some games where the experience is more about aesthetics, or a more abstracted emotional experience than a standard linear story, or a story that challenges the preconceived notions that a player might have. In the Stanley parable, you play as an office drone named Stanley. There is a narrator who tells Stanley what to do. At one point early in the game, you come to 2 doors. The narrator tells you to take the door on the left. You can do that, or you can take the one on the right.
This was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well.
There's a thrill and defiance in playing with the mechanics of the game and in teasing the narrator to get a response.
Stanley stepped into the broom closet, but there was nothing here, so he turned around and got back on track. Maybe to you this is somehow its own branching path. Maybe when you go talk about this with your friends, you'll say, "Oh, did you get the broom closet ending? The broom closet ending was my favourite." Oh, no, no, not again. I won't be part of this. I'm not going to encourage you. I'm not going to say anything at all. I'm just going to be patient and wait for you to finish whatever it is you enjoy doing so much in this room. Please take your time.
Even though you're interacting with a predetermined finite piece of art, you're an agent being given a tactile experience, sometimes an experience that can allow you to empathize in ways you just can't with a film. In the game Undertale, you play as a human child in an underground world of monsters. You can fight and kill monsters, or you can figure out a way to spare them. When I played Undertale, I chose to befriend monsters and help them through their problems, and if I had gone a different route and had instead killed all the monsters I came across, I would have been feared and hated and viewed as a murderer. It would have been a very different game and a very different experience in gameplay and tone and in what emotions I felt while playing. In fact, the emotional connection I felt while playing it was so strong that despite being curious and hungry for more content, I resolved to just let the game be and just watch YouTube videos of what my other, hypothetical, more violent playthrough would have looked like, which the game had, to my surprise, anticipated. People also don't think about art forms evolving or the fact that games are still kind of in their infancy. If you care about media and storytelling, you should care about video games. Games are not superior to film, but they're consumed in a totally different way, in a way we're still figuring out. While far from the first video game ever produced, Pong is a reasonable choice for one of the first video games to attract the interest of a mass audience.
The fact that you didn't feel passive for the first time, not that you don't mind being passive with TV, but for the first time you were doing something here that translated to something over there in the form of a game, that was kind of mind-blowing.
If you put Pong on the same timeline as the Lumieres and Edison, we're only about 10 years out of the silent era. So pre-Casablanca, pre-Citizen Kane, no Third Man, no Godfather, no 2001, Snow White, the first full-length cell animated film, came out in 1937. Not to say that silent and early filmmakers weren't amazing artists. Some of them will always be up there, with anything any art form has to offer. But no single era represents the full capacity of film as a medium. Even now, over 100 years after the arrival of a train at La Chateau, film is still evolving and producing great works. Everyone talks about rock and roll and comic books being seen as degenerate garbage by alarmists when they were first introduced. But I feel like less people know or understand that not only are new mediums hated, but technological advancements within mediums, advancements that ultimately allow for a greater range of expression, are initially met with contempt from critics as well. Most of the films we see today are in widescreen, in color, and are accompanied by sound. Other formal choices are only used for artistic or budgetary reasons, like before digital, when black and white film stock was cheaper than color. The thing with these advancements, though, is that when they were first developed and put into widespread use, critics hated them. In 1963, in Film Quarterly magazine, Charles Barr published an article called CinemaScope, Before and After.
What is CinemaScope?
CinemaScope being the name of one studio's widescreen technology.
CinemaScope, developed by 20th Century Fox, is the most revolutionary screen effect since talking pictures began.
Those were the days, really, when people were saying, oh, what a pity that this spectacular format has been developed, which is obviously not one that any serious humanist film would want to adopt. It all seemed so shallow, so much already contradicted by the work that was being done in CinemaScope, particularly by Hollywood directors like Nicholas Ray and Centi Minnelli, but even with starting to be used by French directors.
C'est très chouette. J'aime beaucoup le cinémascope.
Ce n'est pas fait pour des hommes, c'est fait pour les serpents, pour les enterrements.
Most films had relied on careful framing and a certain style of editing to portray information, and widening the frame in this way was seen as inartistic and anti-cinema. Going even further back, Barr talks about how photography was seen as less artistic than painting, and how film, as an extension of photography, was seen similarly, and color photography was, of course, less art than black and white. On the subject of early photographers trying to make photography more painting-like by posing prints together as a sort of montage that Barr calls grotesque, he quotes Helmut Gernsheim, who said, "The mistaken ambition to compete with painting drove a minority to artificial picture-making alien to the nature of photography. To appreciate photography requires, above all, understanding of the qualities and limitations peculiar to it." In his book, Gernsheim also says that prejudice, jealousy, and sheer ignorance of the functions of photography were bound to frustrate any rational argument, so long as it was considered a cheap substitute for, or a shortcut to, painting, and that the absurdity of judging paintings by the standards of photographic truth, and photographs by the degree to which they succeeded in imitating fine art, was realized only after a great deal of trash had resulted. You could say the exact same thing about people who want games to be cinematic, as opposed to those who want to take advantage of what makes the medium unique.
The Stanley Parable has been praised by various critics as an outstanding commentary, exploration, and subversion of various video game design concepts and cliches, such as overly simplistic level design, the illusion of choice, and free will within a video game. With the level of praise that has been placed on the game, I expected a masterpiece that would possibly even surpass such works of art as Memento, The Prestige, or Inception.
Barr, in his defense of CinemaScope, calls 4:3 film more abstract than widescreen because it limits freedom and detail compared to how open and complex the actual human experience of vision is. To take somewhat of a leap forward, interactive media could be seen as another decreased layer of abstraction, being that it can allow you even more space and the chance to explore that space in 3 dimensions. In fact, when Barr describes the weaknesses of Cinerama compared to CinemaScope, and its failure to achieve what he calls a total cinema, a way of surrounding spectators with a total visual world, I'm reminded of playing with my friends' VR headsets and how they, in their own still very flawed way, achieve the sense of visual immersion Barr was dreaming about in his essay. For me, from my standpoint over 50 years later, the idea of the mediums of photography and film not being art, and the idea that widescreen and sound film are lesser cinema compared to silent and 4:3 film is completely ludicrous. It's my hope that 50 years from now, or at least 100 years from Pong, video games will be given the same respect, and the idea of looking down on them will be just as laughable. Also, all experiences with media are subjective. Critics are a lens to look through to see what works might bring you new or valuable experiences, not people who share the same views as you, and not a threat. And you should never really care what they think about a work versus your own unique experience of it, unless you think they might open you up to even better, more enriching works, or let you see past works in a new light. And the idea of not playing or enjoying a game if it has non-traditional gameplay, or if it's text-based, or if it's a walking simulator, is just as dismissive as going on about how games are bad, or how the advent of sound is the end of cinema. And I honestly do not care if a piece of interactive media is called a video game, or if it's considered art, or if it's considered good by whoever, as long as the experience of playing it brings something new and valuable to my life.
The Stanley Parable is not a video game, and is merely an interactive walking about an office building simulator. The worst part is it doesn't even have a multiplayer mode. It was nothing but pretentious nonsense trying desperately to be meaningful, while not appealing to my preconceived notion as to what exactly a video game is. 0 out of 10.
If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. If you want to learn more about movies, check out my So You Want to Be a Film Nerd series, where I yell about Truffaut and Sam Raimi and throw Crash in the trash can. Where it belongs.
And video games are better now than they've ever... It's the only medium that's better now than it's ever been because of technology, you know? Like, 30 years, like 1980, if you were like, I want to make a video game that's... you lose your son, and then you have to track down a serial killer, not just to save your other son, but to finally atone for your past mistakes and be able to look yourself in the mirror, the programmer would be like, okay, I can give you a yellow circle, eating other smaller yellow circles.